Welcome to the place of rest, where our aim is to give you language that helps you displace the growing confusion, chaos, and dis-ease of our times. My name is Jonathan Boyce, and it's my pleasure to bring to you today's episode. Virginia has a conversation with Brandon Amalani of Blue Shield to discuss well-being and how things in our environment can affect it. We hope you enjoy today's conversation.
I'm fascinated by your work. I am just completely humbled by the time, the energy, the heart that you've put into this subject, because I think what you bring to the table in terms of discussing the implications of frequencies, energy in the most fundamental, elementary way, and the assault it's having on our spirit, our soul, and our body is crippling. And we're all fairly ignorant on the topic. And so I would love you to give us your background a little bit for the sake of our listening audience. And then I would appreciate it if you could speak to me about the implications of your work on the really displacing the confusion, chaos, and disease, specifically as it pertains to our mental and physical health.
Yep, absolutely. So that's kind of a loaded question. So my background, I actually got my roots in nutrition and herbalism, and then kind of evolved towards a traditional Chinese medicine modality with the person I work with, who's an acupuncturist, who actually turned me on to Blue Shield originally. He's Japanese lineage. So as you know, like herbalism, natural medicine, herbal folk medicine kind of started in Ayurveda and then migrated to Tibet, and they put their influence and awareness on it. And then basically traditional Chinese medicine added 5-element theory and yin and yang, and then that evolved even further in Japanese lineage. I founded a company called Shin Blossom, which is basically a specialty company. We specialize in rare botanical extracts and traditional preparation, Japanese preparations. So,
what is the name of your company? Can you say that slower?
Yeah, it's called Shin Blossom. Shin, like the third treasure of Chinese medicine, S-H-E-N. And having the background of traditional Chinese medicine and understanding the body as both physiochemical and electrochemical, I was always, playing with different modalities, pendants, you name it, back in the day, frequency generators, energy machines, electrotherapy devices, trying to figure out something that would be a nice complement, a nice tool for environmental remediation with all this noisy, dirty electricity, if you will, this incoherent EMF that we're going to talk about. And a very long story short, I got turned on to Blue Shield back in, I think it was 2016. An acupuncturist colleague that I work with mentioned that one of his clients was having kind of a Herxheimer reaction to it. So she was, feeling a little fatigued, headaches. She came into the office for her normal acupuncture session, and she said, "Man, I've been having these headaches for the last 3 days, and it was ever since I plugged in that darn Blue Shield." But, as it happened, the acupuncturist that was working on her noticed that her metrics were all better, her organ system communication, everything as far as a traditional diagnosis was improving, organ system communication. So that piqued my interest because I never heard of an EMF or a subtle energy device that was geared towards protecting one from electromagnetic radiation having any kind of physical Herxheimer reaction or detoxification effect. So that got my interest piqued. I met one of the co-inventors named Mark, and we became pretty close. We'd had a lot of Skype calls. I kind of learned the kind of back end of how it was working, and he was based in New Zealand at the time. And so I was just kind of blown away that nobody had heard about it in the United States. He was selling these machines in Australia and New Zealand. And so I decided to help kind of bring awareness about that, as I was in a unique position to understand the body, both from a physiology point of view, but also, traditional Chinese medicine looks at physical, emotional, mental, spiritual, etheric, all these different levels, because we all exist on all these planes of consciousness. So yeah, that's kind of how I got my start with it.
Wow. What can you tell us about the massive cases of anxiety and depression that people are experiencing? I would say anxiety, depression, bipolar disorder, PTSD. I think you have so much to say about what we're individually and corporately experiencing. And I think there are dimensions of it that you can shed light on for people to have hope.
So one thing that's important, because we were one of the first major companies to come out with a substantial technology for EMF remediation, if you will. I am very much not a hammer that sees everything as a nail, right? Not everything's EMF. So when you're talking about depression, you're talking about anxiety, there's all kinds of factors.
It's complex, for sure. It's complex.
Glyphosate, chemicals in the environment, heavy metals. So yeah, it's a major complexity. Everyone's an N of one. Everybody's obviously unique, which I'm sure you can appreciate and understand.
Yeah, and I'm glad you brought that up. That's self-evident, right? It's obvious. But you do see a lot of that, and you do treat it, and you've seen effective and efficient ways of mitigating those things. And I thought it would be a good resource for people to consider when they've tried everything else.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's where we get to the electromagnetic pollution. Okay. So it is a big piece of the health pie that I thought was really missing in the industry. That's why I became so passionate about it. Like everybody was looking at health and wellness from, exercise, nutrition, relationships, all these kind of angles, but nobody was really addressing kind of the elephant in the room, that wireless radiation is compounding it at just a crazy rate. I mean, cell towers are being put up every day, more and more satellites, all these kind of issues are coming up. And really what I focus on and want people to understand is that electromagnetic energy is everywhere, meaning there's no real good or bad EMF. That's a really key understanding. If you took basically a spectrum analyzer and analyzed the background noise, frequencies, energy out in nature, there's magnetic and electric fields everywhere. It makes up everything. So really the distinction or the delineation that I want to make on this is that there's coherent energy and there's incoherent energy. When you're transmitting a signal from a cell tower, for example, or a Wi-Fi router, you're having what's known as an informational carrier wave. So it's the carrier signal that transmits the information from point A to point B. When you start putting the informational wave packets on it, like the text, the video, the voice, that piggybacks on that sine wave essentially, and it's basically creating these transients and this noise on the line, which is incoherent, that our body can pick up. And a lot of people don't realize that our body, at the cellular makeup, every cell in your body is basically like an antenna transceiver. Essentially, it's transmitting informational fields to the environment, and it's receiving informational fields from the environment. And what we see in regards to your specific question with depression, anxiety, and things of this nature, neurological stuff, is that Dr. Martin Pall kind of pioneered the work in regards to the voltage-gated calcium channels, which means when your body is exposed to radio frequency of an incoherent order, your body will basically flood the voltage-gated calcium channels and the ATP-sensitive potassium channels with 100 times the amount of calcium into the bloodstream, which is huge. So not only are we getting blue light at night and, kids are on their phone constantly, without any discipline or regulation, this is affecting them neurologically. And that means the heart, the gut, the brain, you name it. It's going to be influenced by that. And of course, dopamine's going to get hacked. So you got physiological downstream oxidative mechanisms from the peroxynitrine pathway. And this is, again, when we talk about, if we want to get deep into the voltage-gated calcium channels, this is where EMF can be therapeutic or it can be detrimental. It's just based on how basically the voltage-gated calcium channels are stimulated. If you have coherent EMF, like in a high-voltage Tesla coil, pulse electromagnetic field therapy, any kind of light therapy like photobiomodulation, you're going to affect the NRF2 pathway, which is antioxidant, has a lot of healing downstream effects. But if if it's incoherent noise like Wi-Fi routers, cell phones, things like this, it's going to affect the other pathway, the proxy pathway, which basically is oxidative stress. And we know that most chronic and or acute issues can be correlated to oxidative stress, of course. So yeah, it's kind of a big rabbit hole, but that's kind of the overall gist, is that, we want to create as much coherence in our life, which increases cellular communication. All our electrical signaling in our body is optimized. Our body can send cleaner, more coherent signals endogenously when we're not affected by electromagnetic radiation that's incoherent or have a noisy quality to it, if you will.
Fascinating. May I ask what may perhaps be a silly question, but you talk about coherent and incoherent radiation. Does nature fall into the category of coherent radiation?
Largely. Yeah, I mean, there's mostly things are symbiotic. Like if you look at nature, for example, most things are working in harmony for a collective benefit. There's neg entropy. The earth itself is neg entropic, meaning it's self-regenerating. It regenerates itself. It's obvious if you look at how the cosmos work, anything in nature. But there are, there's parasites and there's all kinds of other things that kind of attack and break down life. Are they good or bad? No, again, it's not really so good or bad because they're the recyclers, mold, yeast, fungus, all these things that create cancer conditions or any of these kind of things. They're designed to break down organisms and recycle them so it can, turn into new life. So it's not necessarily bad. So everything's kind of working together in this harmony, even the things that we consider what you would consider incoherent or bad.
Well, it's interesting because R.E.S.T has a language, and we say that R.E.S.T has a language of liberty, and that is the innate capacity for an organism, a person, an individual in our context, to self-govern. And the extent and the measure to which that person can self-govern, exercise their liberty, determines the measure of freedom they live with. Internal cause, external effect. So I'm going to start introducing language, because the language is how we communicate ideas. So our language needs to be accurate. So I love that you talk about balance, harmony, coherence in the context of these coherent and incoherent energy radiation. And the reason I think that's really important is because when you do discuss the function of bacteria, we don't look at them as good and bad. That's not the language of liberty. It's what is lawful and unlawful, to preserve what is just and unjust. So it's kind of a lawful mechanism. It's a law of nature that's set in place. So the good and bad, right and wrong language isn't appropriate to really discuss these things of nature. If we can only learn to incorporate them in how we communicate ideas to each other and how we evaluate the decisions we make and how we engage each other, I think it could be transformative in creating more coherent platforms of communication, if you will. Did that make sense at all?
Yeah, absolutely. And another thing that kind of popped into my mind while you were saying that is, you can look at the simplicity of how people affect you. Like if somebody's in a bad mood or, mentally or emotionally imbalanced around you, they might not say anything, but you can kind of feel the you can feel the vibe or the energy. So that affects your chemical signaling in your body. You might feel more down or sad or freaked out or sympathetic. You go from parasympathetic into sympathetic because I need to get out of this situation. And that has a physical effect, even though there's no physicality to it. It's more of an energetic feeling that you pick up from an environment. There's Russians have a ton of research, Chinese have a ton of research about how, somebody's stewing in a house for 20 years and just who's depressed and angry and sad, that actually energy can be trapped in natural organic materials like wood and stuff like that. So if somebody can walk into a house and have what's going on here? Everything just felt different. And those, how do you explain that through the reductionist scientific method? But it is a phenomenon that we experience, right?
Well, it's a law of nature. It's self-evident, and it's verified by our natural affections. We experience these things. It's really interesting. I work with first responders, and I can't wait to introduce you to this community and to this part of our work. And they have what's called an incident command system that goes into play no matter who or what happens. People from different departments, different stations, different tiers of law enforcement can show up, and they have a working knowledge of this incident command system. But there's somebody that's in charge that immediately everybody can fall into place and perform their function. And after months and months and months of working with this team of guys that have serious PTSD and are seriously compromised for a number of reasons, depression, anxiety, addictions, the whole thing you can imagine that comes with continuously facing this kind of incoherence, right? It's their work. But it's amazing because after about 6 months, 7 months of working with this group, a particularly challenged individual in the sense that he kind of reduced everything to common sense tagline things that he's already heard, been there, saw that, done that, next. But I could see that there was some understanding that he was lacking that could be transformative in his life. After months and months and months of working with him and experiencing measures, I think he was experiencing measures of frustration. He put his hands on his head and exclaimed, "I get it, I get it, I get it." And he said, R.E.S.T, the work you're doing with R.E.S.T is you're trying to help us understand and apply what's already woven, set, established within our very anatomy, which is an internal command system. And you're trying to teach us what that is so we don't have to be derailed by the external things that we experience. We don't have to react to situations. We get to respond to them. And we get to have a working knowledge of all the natural resources we have within ourselves to show up and be whole, regardless of the trauma that hits us, because life is messy and things are unpredictable.
Yeah.
But it was really a beautiful thing to hear, because if I would have understood his language, right, around which the framework that's part of their training, wow, I could have built a bridge between that and this really quickly. Anyway, it began to resonate with him. And as I heard you speak and listened to several of your podcasts, I thought, wow, this guy really understands these command systems. But the command systems require a language. And the language has to be the language of liberty that gives you the hope and the promise of freedom, right? It's not just something that happens randomly, but if we understand our makeup and the makeup of the ecosystem around us and the resources we have, I think there's something, we can find a rhythm of life. And I know this can seem a little bit confusing perhaps to people listening to us. Maybe you can bring some clarity to what I just said, because you understand these systems.
Well, I mean, really the crux of what you're saying is it's the difference between knowledge and wisdom, which are two totally different things. Like knowledge can be external and we can accumulate it and aggregate it from a lot of different sources, but wisdom is an internal process.
And it's the application, right?
Yeah, it's the application, the assimilation, and digestion of knowledge, and pressure tested with that of nature. Like if it doesn't relate to your experience subjectively and objectively, or your natural external experience, its knowledge can be fairly useless. And I have a lot of knowledge, but I don't value that. Like my whole goal is to develop wisdom and like how does all of this work? And that led me down the rabbit hole of magnetism and the magnetodielectric nature of reality. And that affects, again, all of these little different levels that we exist on: mentally, emotionally, physically, spiritually, etherically, psychically. It affects all of those levels.
It's all real.
Yeah.
When it comes to addictions, for example, if you are not willing to delve deep into the implications of all those realms, we're never going to end this toxic, cyclical addiction crisis that we're facing.
Yeah, and the question
because it deals with the existential. You can't leave the existential outside of that discussion, or the spiritual, if you will.
No, you can't. And then, you also have to think, nature is not wasteful. So people sometimes need certain things and need to keep experiencing things until they develop that internal wisdom from their knowledge and experience, their subjective experience, and it's kind of hard to hear at some levels because I'm not justifying anything. It's not for me to judge like why somebody needs to go through something. Obviously, I've been through my stuff. Everybody has stuff to go through.
All of us. Yeah, it's part of the human condition, right?
Yeah. But, how do you grow and evolve and change and mature and develop if you don't go through things? It's part of the process.
Yeah, and the Chinese, I think, have tapped into this thousands and thousands of years ago, that there is this knowledge that we carry in our body. Our body has full knowledge of things that we don't understand. When knowledge and understanding is a function of the soul, right? Your mind, your heart, your will, your conscience, your feelings, and how you engage them with curiosity and wonder. That's what gives you understanding. But knowledge is something that is innate. There's an intelligence in our bodies. So when knowledge and understanding converge, that's wisdom. It's the application of understanding, right? And knowledge. It's the integration of those things. And you're so right. I think if we can approach this topic of wellness and healing with a lot of curiosity and wonder, and we're willing to put our presuppositions aside and really learn about these realms. I call it the realm of heaven, the kingdom of heaven, right? This existential quantum physics. It's amazing what we are learning about, especially with the advancement of technology and about this information system, this realm, this kingdom, if you will. And then there is the kingdom of God that I think is that primary sphere of government, which is the innermost parts of the heart of man, the heart, the will, the conscience, and feelings. And then there's a kingdom of our bodies, which is another information system, right? The kingdom of the world, if you will, that external. Yeah. But I was captivated by how you spoke about the things that are insulting those three systems, that are really capsizing our lives. Is there a simple summary that you can give with understandable language about those three spheres and how they can change people's lives?
Yeah, wouldn't it be nice if there was something simple?
Yeah.
It's like
simple.
We crave simplicity because that's where we come from, but then the world is not so simple.
No.
Yeah, they're on a lot of different levels. I mean, where do you start?
I think you know what you did for me? You invited me to expand my understanding, advance in my understanding. I wrote this down, and occupy different territory and time because of that. So I wonder if this theory, this reality, that if we're willing to expand our understanding, that there are three realms that make up who we are in their information system, their kingdoms, and we're continuously interacting with them. So if we're willing to expand our understanding of that in every facet of life, beginning with our knowledge and our understanding of the things we're carrying in our very body, and we're willing to advance to change something practical in our lives from that thing that we're more knowledgeable about, perhaps, then we can occupy different space in our relationships, in our jobs, in ourselves. And I don't know, maybe that's still too complicated, but maybe you can speak to that, because that's what you did for me.
Well, I think that just simplifying things is really the kind of key understanding. Like with all these three levels that you're talking about, there's a physicality and a non-physicality. I mean, most people don't realize that I use a radio analogy, like a ham radio, because it's very, very simplistic. We have a physical vessel, which is analogous to a radio, but I always like to say the signal is not in the radio, right? Yeah, your consciousness is throughout your entire body, but it's also outside of your body. You break the radio, the signal is still bouncing out there. It's still, your consciousness is embodying. It's very much like a magnet. And when we dissect like what is actually going on with reality, it's nature itself is a magnetodielectric. So everything we see, magnetism is essentially the fundamental force in reality.
Yes.
So when we understand that point, we got to say, okay, law of thermodynamics, like energy can't be created or destroyed. So we create all this potential, all this magnetic inertial divergence is happening. Where does it go? And a lot of people don't talk about the dielectric, which is essentially counter space. So we're kind of moving physical and non-physical. So just like a magnet, if you look at a magnet under a supercell, for example, which I actually have one on my desk right here, these are easy to pick up. The guy let the patent go out, and what it is, it's two pieces of optically flat glass with a ferroreactive fluid inside, and it's backlit by LEDs. So if you light this thing up, you can kind of see the LEDs. And when you put something like a magnet, which I actually don't have at my desk, what you'll see is
I need one of those. That's amazing.
It's a cool teaching tool because you can actually see, you put a magnet under there and you see a black hole in the center of every magnet. Now you can have a piece of magnetized ferrite or non-magnetized, and they're qualitatively the same exact thing, but one is qualitatively different, right? One has a conjugate circuit of magnetodielectric energy, but they look physically exactly like the same. And a lot of people talk about north and south pole of a magnet. That's not actually a physical location. You can chop a magnet straight in half, pull them apart, and there's a new north and a new south, right? So understanding like the crux of like, we come from R.E.S.T, which is funny because, it's the acronym. Like, what is R.E.S.T? R.E.S.T is inertia. So we're kind of, as humans, we're wired a little bit upside down and backwards. And we see, you might have heard me say this on other podcasts or videos, but I like the analogy of a bomb exploding because I think it's really, it's not a perfect analogy, but it points the direction of, you explode a bomb, somebody will look at that and be like, look at all that energy. And yes, it has an energetic effect, but the energy was actually antecedent to the explosion. The explosion was actually the use of that energy. It's the dissipation of that energy versus the energy itself. So all force vectors in nature seek rest or inertia. So if I had two magnets right here, which I should have got for the show because it's a really cool teaching tool, you can take two magnets and you put them together with different polarities and basically it'll push apart. Like there's this invisible force that literally creates space. Like it won't let the magnets kind of come together. But if you flip them around, they implode towards each other. So they move, towards counter space or the dielectric. So that understanding, if you get the analogy of a supercell and a magnet, you understand 90% of the mechanics of the universe. The potential comes from basically nothing. It comes from the emptiness, just the potentiality, which makes possible the manifest of actuality. So that's the yin and yang principle from traditional Chinese medicine. You need to have yin, you need to build moisture and yin in the body to actually have yang energy be able to fully express.
Well, isn't the potentiality the mystery of God that gives human beings the option to voluntary consent or not?
Exactly.
to comply with laws of nature that are self-evident. And if we choose to not comply, it's okay, but we bear the consequences of that non-compliance.
Yeah,
But
it's
if we
not.
choose to comply, we have a whole different, I mean, we live in a universe of laws. So if we deviate from those laws and we become a law unto ourselves, which we have the option of doing, by the way, right? We have free will, we have the option, but the consequences are of our own making, not of an evil force outside of us destroying us. Although there is that, opposing force to the potentiality of that which is good. And there you explained in such beautiful ways the reality of good and evil, right and wrong, just, unjust, lawful and unlawful. And the human being has maybe that place to choose. And I mean, you can take that little statement you made, and I guess my little cheesy, commentary, but you can take that and say, wow, I have a lot of power and authority over what's happening in my life and in my health and in the conditions I find myself in, financial, mental, emotional, physical. And it's how am I using that energy? Am I creating these explosions? Because the energy's there, right? Or am I using it to advance life, or I guess to advance life or diminish it?
You're on point, and that's the crux of it, isn't it? And even your statement was a little bit more towards an external point of view, because really people start to argue, well, what's the use of free will? We have it. Obviously, it's self-evident that we can see demonstrably that free will is a thing, but is it free will if you have to follow these rules and guidelines in order to feel in harmony, balance, in flow state, and all of this kind of stuff? But what people aren't getting about that concept is that you are the thing. Like, we're all made of the same stuff. We're all different modulations of the one thing. So you're essentially doing harm to yourself by not being in harmony with yourself. We like to project it as like, I want to be in harmony with God's will or something external, but really are you against yourself or not?
That's right.
And you can stop being against yourself at any time.
And I love that you said that, because here's the thing, Brandon. The Trinitarian constitution of all things is undeniable. And God says he's a triune being. And we're triune beings, spirit, soul, and body. He's a triune being. And being a scientist and an incredible thinker that you are, you see the Trinity of Trinities consistent, creating this Trinitarian constitution of all things. So if we're made in the image of God, spirit, soul, and body, and this place of rest does exist, this zone, this area, and we get to comply or not, doesn't that make us fully free, potentially? If we exercise liberty internally, which is our capacity to self-govern. If you exercise liberty, a decision, you know what I mean? You have the capacity to live free in a potentially chaotic environment.
Absolutely. And that's why I always say with Blue Shield, it's just a tool. It's something kind of running in the background. It's like your consciousness is the powerhouse. I mean, most people don't want to train Qigong. They don't want to do these kind of energy practices to develop their consciousness, meditate, do all this kind of stuff. And that's the most powerful. That's what I think, and of course, not everybody might agree with this, but moving towards self-mastery, you won't need a lot of external things.
That's right. No, everything you need to expand life and joy and is internal, is within you.
Yeah. And that's, from a scientific point of view, we are like a conjugate circuit, kind of like a magnet is a conjugate circuit of magnetism and dielectricity. We have a physicality, we have a electromagnetic component, but we have a dielectric nature, which is the soul, spirit, dreams, things that are non-quantifiable, that are outside and antecedent to psychophysicality. There's metaphysics is very hyper rational. That's what I did. We get confused by all the quantum talk that's come since, the World War II era, which quantum just comes from the term quantity or quantitative. And a lot of what you'll see in modern physics is just euphemisms for the stuff they allegedly debunked. So you have, when you're talking about Trinity, you have the magneto, the dielectric, and then the ether, which is essentially potentiality, the source field, or whatever you want to call that, chi, ki, prana, Holy Spirit, whatever you want to call it.
Jesus, God, whatever, yeah.
Yeah. So
it just is. It's undeniable. The Trinitarian constitution of everything that holds us together and the world around us together is, whatever language you want to use, it's undeniable. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Well, do you know what, Brandon? I just want to say what a joy it was to have this brief conversation. We got to have you back. And Absolutely. You're not scary after all.
I try to be. I mean, I'll work on it.
No, thank you so much. You made this so easy. You're a kindred spirit. We're working in the same lot, in different parts of the same field. So I love it.
Absolutely. Happy to be back.
Thank you. How can people find out more about your work? How can they access this Blue Shield resource? Do you see patients? Do you see clients? How can they contact you?
They can contact us through our website, which is blueshield.com. Now that's blue with no E, BLU shield.com. We pride ourselves on articles. We know people buy a Blue Shield, they're going to be set for years. But so we focus on a lot of continued education, current relevant events in the electromagnetic world space, EMF pollution space, scalar energy, modern physics, that kind of stuff. And, we definitely check out some of our videos. We actually are one of the first, if not the first, EMF protection technology company that actually has an independent review board certified clinical trial on our work. We show, statistically significant data where Blue Shield benefits, everything from voltage gated calcium channels, heart rate variability, blood glucose, natural killer cells, basically like cognitive function, executive function, sleep patterns, deep sleep, REM sleep, all that kind of stuff. It's all on our website. And I know this is a short conversation. It's kind of hard to get into all the details, but it's all easily referenced on our website, Blue Shield.
Well, we're gonna have you back to break those down for us systematically, but practically, do you have resources that people can order right away to mitigate and begin to work with
absolutely.
the pollution in their
They're
environment?
The ease of implementation is amazing on these products. You just plug it into the centermost point of your house and your body sympathetically entrains with it over, a 7 to 12 day period. And what we found through the research is that your body stops mounting an immune response and attacking the EMF, because that's really what's happening. It's draining people's immune system, it's flooding the voltage gated calcium channel and the ATP sensitive potassium channels. And it's really kind of wreaking havoc on our immunological function and nervous system for the most part. So this is an easy kind of tool to have in the background if somebody's not really a dedicated meditator and really trying to enhance their biofield. There's no living in a box or a cage, which has its psychological and emotional implications of like trying to be in a Faraday cage. And not only that, it's not really healthy because we haven't even touched on plasma fields and what are known as plasmoids, which is a fancy way of saying charged particles that are in and around our body and how those are affected by metal and affected by incoherent electromagnetic radiation. So it's just an easy tool that, you can plug in your house, and then we have portable models that you can carry on your body. If you're like running to the store or catching a flight or something like that, you can take that with you as well.
If somebody's feeling a lot of fatigue, they're getting sick often, they can't think clearly, they just have an overwhelming sense of not being right, could they buy one of your devices, plug it in their home today, wear something on their body, and feel a measure of relief?
Yeah, I think so. And that's our subjective experience. And that's why we really wanted to do an independent review board certified clinical trial on it, because we're getting all this subjective data for years. And of course, I'm becoming more indoctrinated all the time. I was already, a fan. And I try and leverage when psychosomatic effects are positive. I like to leverage that, but we found out it's a lot more than psychosomatic. And of course, it's a piece of the pie. It's a huge piece of the health pie because your environment is everything, but, clean, structured water, becoming mineralized, taking adaptogenic plant botanicals that strengthen your electromagnetic biofield and help you regulate physiochemical patterns and responses in the body. We need to, and exercising, going for a walk, not even just weightlifting or anything like that, but going for a walk, you're pulsing your body, which you have a lot of iron in your body. You're creating a pulse electromagnetic field every time you walk or jog or, exercise. So exercise, flexibility, and mobility, and getting fluid. And, really, if we simplify everything from any modality, any medical perspective, it's blocked energy is kind of the issue, right? So cell communication, cell to cell communication, sending coherent endogenous signals and getting nutrient, blood, lymph, and all this kind of stuff moving is key. So it has to be fluid, loose, and open. And when we see disease or not at ease, we see constrictions and refinement, and that, has inflammation components. It has, we can go on and on about all of that, but it's basically to help your body become more coherent. So everything you're doing dietary supplement wise, diet, lifestyle, your mental alchemy, if you will, is going to be a lot smoother and more coherent because you're taking the stress off of your immune system that it would otherwise be spinning its wheels against an invisible enemy ever since AM radio. So yeah, and then we also, so some of those tools are on Shin Blossom with the herbal and dietary side of things. We also have a product on Shin Blossom which is called Sign Tamer, which is a lot of people are buying these kind of plug-in devices for their houses to remediate dirty electricity, which is like cleaning up the sine wave coming into your house. But a lot of those create more magnetic problems because it's shunting the the high voltage spikes of the transients onto the neutral line. And this is the only device that I've seen that I've tested myself with a high pass oscilloscope with a high pass filter. To basically, it does frequency attenuation. So it's basically looking at all 360 degrees of the sine wave and getting rid of micro transients, which are usually out of the range of what most dirty electricity filters do. So that's on Shen Blossom as an adjunct. That's kind of my stack. Like if people are wanting to know what can I do about EMF, it's like Blue Shield in your house is going to create the sympathetic entrainment with these types of nonlinear signals, essentially, at the cellular level, so it's increasing your biofield. And then the sine tamer is really good because you can connect that at your circuit box of the energy coming into the house, and it works on the entire house. And a lot of people don't know that those dirty electrical fields come into your room 7 to 12 inches off the walls. And most people have a bed or some kind of place to sit or work, a desk near their wall. I mean, I'm right next to a wall here, and we have electrical circuitry going throughout the whole house. So that's my stack right now as far as like the best possible EMF remediation, because I've looked into blocking, I've looked into grounding, shielding, all this kind of stuff, and they all have their pros and cons, of course. So we're trying to find like what's the most beneficial that has the least amount of side effects, because you can do it wrong. With dirty electricity filters that aren't proper with shielding, because you don't want to block out the natural energy and plasma fields that are all around us in nature. Our body needs that information. It's evolved to communicate with the environment. So we want to create as a natural environment as possible. And that's why this particular unique circuit that we use, which is a light signaling circuit within Blue Shield, seems to be the most efficacious and safest for basically everybody. We haven't found anybody that actually had any kind of negative reaction to it over the last, several eight years that we've been involved.
How much does it cost to get started? And does the size of the house matter?
So our coverage area on most of our units is pretty good, and it'll basically, most standard houses will benefit from any of them. It's more about
what is good. Wait, what is good and what's a standard house?
So I don't know, anywhere from 3,000 to 5,000 square feet. Roughly just around ballpark. What we do is if you go to blueshield.com, you hit get started. A metric we use is a website called antennasearch.com. So you plug in your address, and that'll give you kind of like all the cell towers and radio antennas within a 2-mile radius of your house. And if you want to future-proof yourself, get the most powerful Blue Shield you can. But if you're more rural and you only have 2 or 3 cell towers within a 2-mile radius, Phi series, which is our entry-level series, which you can get in at like $299, and then when that runs all the way up to our super premium levels. We have the new Evo Pyramid. That's our most expensive product. That's $3,000. It just really, they're going to keep building the infrastructure. I mean, that's really not going anywhere. And so, as much as you want to future-proof yourself, and obviously it's relative to your budget and everything, but we do have entry-level models that are better for more rural situations. Most people are going to be kind of like the Phi 3, which is the high-end or the most powerful of our entry-level series. And then you'll get into the B1, the C1, and then the Evo series for, metropolitan areas where you'll be shocked if you've never looked at antennasearch.com and you live in a city. You'll be shocked with how many cell towers are in a very close proximity, especially with the 5G rollout and the millimeter waves not traveling as far.
Okay, antennasearch.com, that's a good starting point for everyone. And then they can go to your website and determine. Do you have a customer service line that people can?
Epic customer service. We got Brian on the phones and Courtney with email customer service. So we usually get to people extremely fast as far as if you have any questions or concerns or just, what's right for me. We definitely have live 1-800 phone support as well.
Thank you so much, Brandon. This is a lot to digest, but it's a necessary conversation. We have to deal with this kind of electromagnetic pollution, the environmental, I should say, pollution.
Yeah, 100%.
And the many facets of it. So thank you so much.
You're very welcome.
We hope listening to this episode has brought you closer to experiencing the freedom of wholeness and healing. If you have questions or comments about today's episode, or for updates about R.E.S.T, please visit our Instagram or Facebook at The Place of R.E.S.T. If you would like more information about Virginia, or to support and join the cause of R.E.S.T, please go to theplaceofrest.com/donate or call 949-289-5935. Thank you for listening to R.E.S.T with Virginia Dixon. We'll see you next week.